What if today is the best day of my life? Just asking that question, you start to produce tonic chemicals in the body. Feeling provides the healing or the revealing of your underlying wholeness. So you'll end up stabilizing that feeling. Your thoughts will begin to change, your conversation will begin to change, your actions will begin to change, and certain things will show up in your life based on that feeling that you are normalizing.
Welcome to the Seano Show. Oh my gosh. I'm your host, Seano McFarlane. Today, we have an incredible, inspiring guest with us. He's a visionary. He's a best-selling author. He's a spiritual teacher who has touched the lives of millions around the world. You might know him as the founder or spiritual director of the Agape International Spiritual Center in Los Angeles. It is an incredible honor and blessing to have you on the Seano Show. Michael, welcome.
Hey, Seano, thank you so much for the invitation. It's good to be in your powerful energy.
Yeah, powerful energy. Also, I want to say he's a host of a podcast, Take Back Your Mind.
That's right. Take back your mind.
And I was blessed to be on your show a couple of weeks ago, and that was powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, Michael, I have so many things, wonderful things I want to ask you and talk to you about. When I learned a little bit, when we talked a little bit on your show, I learned a little bit of background on you about your moment, kind of your North Star, and when you were, in a little bit of trouble back in the day. Would you mind telling our guests a little bit about, those days and kind of how you found it?
I was a young guy in my early 20s. I was attending USC, and I just left Atlanta, Georgia. I was matriculating through Morehouse College at the time. And I came back to Los Angeles because my girlfriend, which became my wife, gave birth to my baby boy. So I came back to LA. And I was sitting in a meeting, and a revolutionary meeting to basically change the world by any means necessary. And I heard a voice behind me say, if you were to take over the world tomorrow, would the world be any different? So I looked around the room, and I could see the pathology in all of the beings in the room. And I realized that the world wasn't going to be any different. So I left. I enrolled in USC, psychobiology major. I began to have a series of these inner experiences that I could not, I didn't know what it was. I thought I was going crazy. So the first thing I did was I stopped smoking weed. I figured the cannabis sativas was adding to this experience I was having. At the time, going through school, I was selling weed to pay for tuition, have my own stuff free. And there was a convergence in which, one, I had a spiritual awakening. I was killed in a lucid dream. I was stabbed in the heart. The pain was excruciating physically as well as emotionally. When I woke up from it, I could see differently. I could see we were surrounded by this presence. I didn't use the word God back then. I called this presence love, beauty. The love was so intense, and the beauty was just beyond description. Everything, from the lint in a rug, everything shone with this presence. And I could never get back in the box. So I got busted on my last dope deal. I remember this guy named was Kenny that I was getting my keys from. He'd fly in from Indio with 100, 200 kilos and,
Oh, you were messing around.
I always messed around. I had people working for me in Nashville, Atlanta, Chicago, LA. It started off really small, just for me to pay what I needed to pay. Then it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. People just loved working with me. And it was a very brief period of time in my life, but it was very intense. And a lot of darkness was there, so anyway, I'm telling this guy, yeah, I'm not doing this anymore. I said, this is my I wasn't trying to do this for the rest of my life. This was just and he said, man, you're so honest, you're so pure. You got to keep doing it. I said, no, I'm not. So I'm sitting there in the room and my solar plexus goes crazy. And I said, we got to get out of here right now. He said, why? I said, I can't explain it, but we better leave. So we leave my spot and driving down the street, and the police run me off the road up onto the sidewalk. They checked my car. I didn't have any paraphernalia, didn't have any weed, nothing in my car. They asked me where I lived. I always had my mother and father's address on my license. I never had where I really lived on my license. I said, live down the street right there. They looked at looked at my license. They looked at the address. And they said, you don't live over here somewhere? I said, nope. So they proceeded to knock on every single door on this other block until my wife my wife opened the door and they rushed in.
Wow.
And they found the marijuana. They brought me and they put me in there. And they said, is this yours? I said, I don't live here. I don't know what you're talking about. And they eventually took me down to the Rimpal police station, handcuffed me, went and got a search warrant, then came back, took me back to where the drugs were and arrested me so that the time stamp on the search warrant and their arrest matched. Now, I won't go through all the things, but eventually we ended up going to court. We're still in probably the arraignment process. And my attorney, I hired an attorney. He was the best in the business at that time. I could afford it. And his name was Harry Weiss. And he had an assistant attorney. And the assistant attorney is quizzing this police officer who wasn't even there. He was a motorcycle cop. And he said, why did you go to Mr. Beckwith's house? He said, well, we got a tip from an informant that a big drop was going to happen. So we got a search warrant. We waited, and when we saw the drop, we went in and arrested him. And so the assistant to my attorney got up and said, that's hearsay evidence. We demand that the informant show up and identify the accused, or this case must be thrown out of court. So the judge brings everybody to the bench and says, listen, we need the informant here. It was in 3 days. So I go home. Now keep in mind, I'm in court. I don't care about the courtroom. I've already been told that I'm walking free by the inner voice, by the presence of God within me.
Oof.
Told me I'm free. Now, all my friends thought I was crazy. They said, man, you're going to jail. You're gonna go to jail for the marijuana. The federal government wants you because you had all those guns in your house. And, I said, nope, I'm walking free without a record. So they just thought I'd lost my mind on Jesus. So I'm sitting in the courtroom, reading meditation books. And anyway, the judge pulls everybody and says, we need the informant here in 3 days. We come back 3 days later and the prosecutor says, Your Honor, the informant will not come. He's afraid for his life. And the judge said, Mr. Beckwith, I have no other recourse but to set you free. I hope I'll never see you in my courtroom again. And I said, Your Honor, you never will. And I left. I went home. And there was a weather vane on my neighbor's roof. And it was obviously pointing in the direction of the wind. And I said, God, presence, if this means what I think it means for my destiny, I want that weather vane to point in my direction against the wind. Before I could get all the words out, the weather vane pointed right at me. I fell to my knees and cried like a baby and just surrendered my life to God. Never looked back, never got high again. Just plunged into the spiritual life, meditation retreats, metaphysical churches. And I was being followed by the police at this time. So they went to more psychics, more churches, they went more meditation retreats because, I was just trying to get a sense.
They couldn't believe it, right?
No.
There's no way.
There's no way this guy had a real turnaround like this, And
They were wrong.
They were wrong. And then another miracle happened. I mean, a bunch of them, but one was my wife and I we had a little boy, and a fire broke out in our kitchen at night. We were asleep. And we grabbed him, and we could see the flames coming out of the kitchen. So we ducked under. We got out to the house. The fire department came, put out the flames, and I had to stay with my parents for a while until, insurance adjusters came and fixed the place up. So when it was finally time to meet with the insurance adjusters, they go into the house, they look at the damage, but there was no evidence of any fire. There was smoke on the kitchen wall. Nothing burned. The only damage was from the fire department coming in and dousing everything, the rugs, the kitchen, the stove, the curtains. And they said, you sure there's a fire? Yeah, we know there's a fire here. You can see the smoke. They said, but there's no fire. There's nothing burned. So Insurance company paid for a complete redo, new rugs, new curtains, new paint, new furniture that the fire department had ruined. But at that particular time, there was a yellow ribbon around the house, so everybody thought I'd moved. So people that the hanger-oners and people that would come by and see if they could, score, even though I never had a lot of stuff in my house, I had a stash house. They just thought I'd moved. So all of that energy and all of that traffic was gone. Wow. I had a brand new apartment. It was a duplex, and I went on with my life.
Wow.
So it was like, I think about that sometimes, even to this day. It's like
powerful stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there was a blaze, okay? Nothing burned. Yeah.
Michael, walk the listeners from that time, your studies, your education, to the beginning of Agape.
Okay. It took a couple of years to integrate this vast consciousness. At that particular time in my life, the invisible realm was more real to me than this couch. I was way expanded, and I was very perplexed as to why human beings were chasing money, and and I'd been a money chaser. You know what I mean? It was all I didn't quite fit here. I was pretty much by myself. I'd lost all my friends. I thought I'd freaked out. So I'm integrating this experience that I'm having. And I can remember sitting in my living room, and I said, okay, what do you want me to do with my life? God is more real to me than anything. And the phone rang. And there's this woman on the phone, and she said, Michael, this is Michael Beckwith. I said, yes. And she said, we went to high school together, and I'm looking through the high school annual, and I see your picture. And your phone number was under there, and God told me to call you. God said you could help me. I said, really? So I started counseling her. I prayed for her, and she told me all the mistakes she had made in life. She just confessed, and she started sending people to me. People were coming around either on the phone. We didn't have Facebook and all, Zoom at that time, phone, or they'd meet me in person, and they'd get healings, and I'd pray for them. And one day I saw this woman at a restaurant. I had never seen this person in person since high school. I saw her in line at a restaurant, and I called out her name, and she looked at me, and she was stunned, and she ran away and never called me again. Because I think in her mind, she was so embarrassed by the things she had shared with me that she had done in her life, that it was okay to speak to somebody anonymously over the phone, even though she knew me in high school. But when she actually saw me, it startled her. But anyway, it brought me to an awareness that what my destiny would be. So my mother was an individual that, I was born in Bethesda, Maryland, grew up in D.C. for a few years. My father moved us to Los Angeles when I was a little boy. So my mother was the person in the family that when someone died in our family, she went with them. She would escort them to the other side. And they would say to her, Alice, it's not your time. And they would send her back. Then she would wake us up, me and my brothers, and say, Aunt so-and-so just passed, Aunt Marie just passed, or a grandmother or a cousin, because she had taken them. So she was very sensitive to this kind of thing. So when I had my spiritual awakening, she was very happy, and she was attending metaphysical churches. So she says to me, you should go to this church. And I said, Mom, I'm not going to anybody's church. I said, they're not really truth sayers there. They have all these scriptures, but they don't really know God. They don't even really know Jesus, And she just convinced me to go. Her and a lady by the name of Alyssa Sprinkles. So finally I go. I said, okay, I'll go. I'll go to your church. It was the Guidance Church of Religious Science. So I'm a little bit late, and I walking down the aisle, and Dr. Daniel L. Morgan is speaking. And he said, heaven and hell are not merely places, they're states of consciousness. And I said, he's right. Like that. I shouted out. I'm like 22 years old. I said, he's right. Like that. And everybody turns around and looks at this guy walking down the aisle. And I sat down and I said, oh, they actually tell truth in church? So I listened to him.
Wow, that's beautiful, man.
Yeah, the next day I'm in his class. And he says, what's your name? I said, Mr. Michael Beckwith. He said, Mr. Beckwith, this is a 15-week class. You walked in on the 7th week. I advise you to leave and come back when we start over. And I said, nope, I am not leaving. With all due respect, I'm going to finish the class and then start over and do it all over again. And he said, okay, if you insist. So that began like formal study of metaphysical principles, of which I was getting information from teachers that had died, teachers on the other side. They were teaching me. And now I'm getting also taught by a great metaphysician, Dr. Daniel L. Morgan. And so what the experience showed me with the woman calling me was when I went to this metaphysical church, they had a track called a spiritual therapist track, a track to be a spiritual practitioner. I said, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. So I went through the classes and eventually graduated as a practitioner. And for 6 or 7 years, I saw 6 to 8 people every day, Monday through Saturday, working with people, because I knew about redemption. I knew not to judge anybody about whatever they were going through, because I had my own experiences, and the power of prayer, spoken word, my forays into the other side allowed me to actually know that miracles can happen, that this was real stuff, And then I began doing seminars before they were popular, all kinds of things. I started something called the Silent Sadhanas, where on Saturdays we would meet and have an all-day meditation with music and programs. It was years ago before a lot of this stuff was even popular.
Amazing.
So I integrated more and more and more. So I became more, before I was just so heaven-bound that I wasn't any earthly good. And so then when it combined, it was like I could be in the earth plane and honor my incarnation and try to serve God as best as I could, And then a number of years later, I actually went through another school. I went through a school of ministry and graduated. And then with the resistance to starting a community was so heavy, but they were on me. The ancestors and the inner beings.
Michael, talk to people, because you're big messaging and about never giving up.
Yeah.
You didn't say, most people go, oh, Reverend, I'm sorry, you're right, I'll start in the beginning. But you said, no, I'll double down.
No, I wasn't leaving the class.
Yeah.
No, he was a very stern guy. Mr. Beckwith, I suggest you leave. Right. And come back when we start again. It's a 7-week class. You can't just jump in here in the 7th week. I said, I am not leaving. With all due respect, I'm not leaving this class.
So you have a vision to start this church, but not everyone's agreeing with your vision.
Well, a couple of things. One, just to segue into becoming a practitioner, I was working for the federal government. I was running a Census Bureau office in Compton.
Oh my God.
I was running this whole joint. And it was the first time that Compton had accurate census on time, because I turned the whole place into what I called an affirmatorium. When people came to work, they had to go in this room and do the affirmations. Wow. I had to keep religion away from government. So I didn't say anything about God, nothing. So you go in, you establish your intention. So I taught them all these principles. And they went out, these people went out, who were many unemployed, gathered the census. Their lives started turning around, being around me teaching them. Many of them went back to school. I mean, it was a big deal. So the federal government comes in and they see what I'm doing and they can't believe it. And they say, well, we want to offer you a job. We want you to go to other government agencies and kind of bring this into it. You're going to get your car. You're going to be a civil servant, blah, blah. It's a nice salary. Then I'm taking my oral exam to be a spiritual practitioner. In the middle of the oral exam, one of the men who was examining me says, I want you to come work for me. And I said, I didn't know who he was. I said, come work for you? Who are you? He said, I'm Bob Love. I run the worldwide prayer ministry. I need somebody like you on staff. So I found out what the salary was, and it wasn't matching the government. But I knew my destiny was to go to the prayer ministry. So I ended up working there for about 7 years, and I turned that organization from a subsidized department to making over $1 million a year net, because I would train the practitioners to go into the zone in prayer, go into alpha range, and the healings that were happening were monumental. And so at a certain point there, the world started closing in on me, and I was told I had to start my own community. And
How was it closing in on you?
I was getting these messages. Brief story, I was teaching a class, and as I walked into this class, the top of my head cracked open. It felt like it cracked open. This light went through my entire being. And I said to the students, "Did you guys hear that?" They said, "No." So I knew I was having an inner experience, full of light. I was talking to my friend Lissa, and I said, "Lissa, this thing happened to me." She said, "I have a friend that does readings. She's a great oracle. Just go see her." I said, "Okay." So I go see this woman. Her name is June. I walk in, I hand her some flowers, and we're walking to the place where she's going to do this spiritual reading on me. And she turns around and she says, "We have opened you up at the top of your head. The Christ presence is moving through you right now. You'll never have to prepare to speak again. Hi, my name is Reverend June." those were her opening remarks.
Wow.
So I say that to say, when she did this reading, she read a chapter out of my life, and she read Agape. She described this center I had come to the planet to build. Keep in mind, I hadn't gone through the school yet. She's reading it, and I'm saying, "What? I'm not starting any spiritual community. I'm not starting any church. What are you talking about?" No. And I'd had a reading when I first woke up years ago by this other man named Reverend Howard, and he said, "You're going to have a worldwide healing ministry. The spirit of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is all in your aura." And so I reframed it. Since I was a psychobiology major in USC, I said, "Oh, he's talking about a healing ministry. I become a doctor." So I didn't take on ministry. So now here's Reverend June talking to me about this spiritual center. Anyway, I didn't do it, obviously, at that time. I hadn't graduated. So now I've graduated. I'm working at the prayer ministry. And I'll just tell you this, I'll try to keep this brief. I was, after we made $1 million, the CEO of the organization calls me into his office, me and two other people. He congratulates us on this. And he says, "I'm going to help you double that money." And I said, "What do you mean? You're going to come in and pray with us?" And he said, No, I'm a businessman. I know how to make this double." And I said, "Okay, I'm listening." And he says, "We're going to put computers on the desk. You can have your practitioners not pray for everybody. Just put the name in the basket. Then at the end of the day, somebody just holds the basket and just prays over it. You'll double the amount of people you can handle, and you'll double your money." I said, "No, if you stop praying and there's no personal relationship with these people that are calling, there's not going to be any results. They're going to stop calling. Your money is going to go down." He says, "This is this particular department is not a for-profit department. This $1 million is good, but that's not why we're here." So he says to me, "I can turn this operation from a 24-hour operation to a 16-hour operation and fire somebody." He's looking at me. I said, "You can do whatever you want, but there's not going to be any computers on my desk while I'm here." So he walks out of the office, slams the door, him and his staff slam, and I just wait. And he comes back in and apologizes. But I knew my upward mobility was gone. I was through politically. It was done. And so I went to see Reverend June again, and she channels ancestors and stuff, and they're mad at me because I haven't started the community yet. And they say, "If you don't start this community, we have no other reason for you to be on the planet." That's what the reading said. I take a vacation. I go to Puerto Vallarta. I'm sitting there, and I have a vision of Agape. I see it. So I come back, and I tell this woman I was the director of training, and there was a woman that was the director of the World Ministry of Prayer. And I said, "I'm leaving. I'm going to train Larry. I'm not going to leave a day before everybody's trained that I'm going. I'm going to start my own spiritual community." And she says, "Where are you going to start it?" And I said, "I've been guided to start it in Santa Monica." And she says, why? Why don't you start one for your own people? And I said, short people? And she turned red and she said, oh, I didn't mean anything by it. And I said, it's okay. I had this melanin for a long time. It's all good, And so eventually I left. And I told, the guy's name was Larry. I told Larry before, I said, Larry, when I leave, they're going to come after you. And they try to convince you to stop praying for the people. And put computers on the desk. Do not give in. You have all the power. He caved within 3 months. I started Agape on November the 30th, 1986. 5 years later, Agape netted $1 million. 5 years later, that organization, that department went back to being a subsidized department.
Wow.
It did a reversal.
Of course it did.
Yeah.
It had to.
Yeah. So I had to give up resistance because I wasn't trying to start a community. I liked my life. I was seeing clients, had my weekends off. I didn't have to deal with staffs or any of that kind of thing. And I was helping a lot of people. But my calling was to do something deeper, do something more wide. And I'm so glad I did. I'm in ecstasy. I'm in bliss in the community, traveling around the world, speaking, teaching, working with people. It's great.
Agape, 38 years. You've been a teacher 40. Is that right?
Yeah, I was teaching more than 40 years because I was teaching those years prior to starting Agape, running the prayer ministry, having my own clients, doing seminars and things like that. So I've been teaching a long time.
I shared this on your show. Agape was, for the 12-step community. That was our church.
Yeah.
And that's why I first heard the term frequency. I heard it from you, and so that's, 89.
Yeah.
Let's talk about frequency.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's now pretty much everybody's talking about vibration or frequency. Yeah. But I can remember years ago telling people that we are vibrational beings, that we're not flesh and blood, that we're actually a vibration of energy and information. That's our uniqueness, and that our frequency is our currency. Our frequency is how we communicate with the great presence. It doesn't know English; it knows our frequency, And so when we pray, when we surrender, when we meditate, we're actually changing our frequency, which then the universal presence by law can match that frequency. We begin to become more in alignment with the great God of the universe. And then healings happen in our life. Miracles take place. Doors open. Opportunities happen because we're the right people now. Mm-hmm. We've. It's not like God's coming down. We're actually going up.
Right on, man.
That's how I see it. So yeah,
right.
That was back in those days. It was a bit weird. Now it's everybody's talking about it. You have quantum physicists and scientists talking.
But you had such a belief in yourself. How did you go through those early times? You knew what you wanted to say. You knew what you wanted to do.
Well, you can't unsee what you've seen.
Amen.
So once I saw it and it changed me, even though I was alone a lot in the beginning days, I couldn't unsee it. I mean, I was facing big time in jail. And I was told I was going to walk free. And it happened. Mm-hmm. And the other things occurred. That is like, I can't deny it. And so it's not that I have confidence in Michael, but I do have confidence in this great presence that I seek to be in alignment with. Through my practice, through my prayer, through my meditation, I want to be in alignment with this presence. So I have confidence, just like an electrician has confidence that electricity is real. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And a plumber knows about, water and the pipes. I know there's a presence. It's real. It's real to me. And I know there are laws. Mm-hmm. You come into alignment with it, it'll lift you.
How does somebody that's new get confidence in the presence?
There are baby steps and baby practices that will open things up for you. Now, a baby step is just think about a moment in your life where you felt that all of your needs were met. Doesn't matter whether you're a little child or an adult. And if you can't find a moment like that, imagine it. Because the brain doesn't know the difference between your imagination and what's real. Imagine, now, what does that feel like? Okay, your role every hour on the hour is to breathe and feel that. The feeling provides the healing or the revealing of your underlying wholeness. So you end up stabilizing that feeling. Your thoughts will begin to change, your conversation will begin to change, your actions will begin to change, and certain things will show up in your life based on that feeling that you are normalizing. That's one baby step. If you want to add kinesthetic to it, you take a pen and pencil and you write it down. I, Michael, am poised, confident, articulate. All of my needs are always met. I feel it. Just write it down over and over and over and over again. And then you write it down 3 ways. I, then you talk about yourself. He, Michael, is. Then you talk to yourself from somebody else. You, Michael are. You, Keno are. You're magnificent. You write all of this down and you say it. So you're saying it. You're hearing what you say. You're writing it. So you're getting the physical aspect of it. I was just looking at an interview with Gabby Thomas, who won the 200 meters. She said she wrote down 500 times a day, I am an Olympic champion.
Boom.
500 times a day. Said it, wrote it, heard it, all the way up to the Olympics. And so she,
all the way to the podium.
All the way to the podium, standing up there with the gold medal.
Right.
Those are baby steps.
Right, baby steps.
But you got to actually do it.
You got to do it. Break down for us, Michael, empowering questions and disempowering questions.
This is really good. This is another way that you grow. We live in a participatory universe, meaning, you have to participate in the flow of it. It's not just going to be handed to you. You actually have to do work on yourself. So many people ask what I call disempowering questions. What's wrong? Who's to blame? The ego always wants to blame somebody if something goes wrong. Who did this? Why me is a big one. Why, God? Why is this happening to me? So if you, by law, the universal law will answer any question you ask. Doesn't matter. So if you ask, why me? It'll go through the database of your life experience and give you all these reasons why you should fail. Your parents left you. They got a divorce. You got kicked out of school. Blah, 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 blah. It'll get, but if you ask a different question, what is within me that's trying to emerge right now? What gift do I have to give to the world? What good is present that I, in this moment, can't see? The universal presence, by law, will answer those questions as well. You begin to catch through intuition, through feeling, through serendipity, through coincidences, the answer to those questions. You'll be guided differently just by asking a higher order question. Right. And you'll pull yourself out of being a victim into developing a spiritual faculty to hear the inaudible. It's different. But most people are unconscious, man.
Right.
Why me? Why don't they like me? Why isn't anything ever worked for me? He's lucky. Right.
Got all the breaks. Yeah. Right. Talk about, Michael, the what if.
What if is another good one.
Right.
What if I had all the money I needed? You can same thing. You can put it negative or positive. What if life is for me? What if the universal presence is working together for my good? What if today is the best day of my life? Just asking that question, you start to produce tonic chemicals in the body. You have an inner pharmacy. That pharmacy matches your thought.
Inner pharmacy, that's beautiful.
Yeah, this pharmacy can create any drug that you can buy, legally or illegally. It can create CBD, it can create anything. So when you put yourself in a higher order of questioning, what if life really is good? Right. What if? Imagine it. Right. Immediately, chemicals are going to be produced to match that question. And then your body's going to change. You're going to stop the aging process. You're not going to age as fast. Your hemispheres are going to start to communicate with each other. You start to catch guidance, and you start to re-enchant your imagination. Many people's imagination have been hijacked by worry and doubt and fear. Anxiousness and anxiety follows that. So by asking an empowering question and asking a high what-if question, you're re-enchanting the imaginal realm again. You're starting to imagine, oh my God, ooh, good things are happening. You start to imagine it. You know, when you break down the word imagine, it says, I am a genie.
Right.
That's
great.
You start to imagine it, and then you start to come into another awareness of being gifted from that which is beyond your imagination, outside of your present paradigm. That's the next level.
Right on.
That's what unknown. That's what real good stuff is. Yeah.
Break down your little acronym for HELP. I love that.
That came, hello, eternal loving presence.
One more time, Michael.
Hello, eternal loving presence. HELP. Yeah, so that came about when I was felt like I was drowning in a riptide in Costa Rica. And it was so difficult to get back. I was so tired, exhausted. The only other person on the beach was my daughter. And she was like a little ant on the sand. And she knew something was wrong. She was looking at me. And I drifted. I'm a good swimmer, but I drifted out so far. I didn't know I had drifted out that far. And so I know a couple of times I went under, swallowed a lot of water. And I thought to myself, have I had any prophetic dreams that this is the last day I'm going to be on this earth? And I checked. I said, no, I haven't had any precognition that this is my last day. So I popped up and I said, and I didn't do this consciously. This came out of my mouth. I said, I need a little help here, like that. I need some help. And then I programmed my mind. I said, regardless of how tired the body gets, do not give up. Just programmed. And then a wave came and I started swimming in. Then another wave came, had more momentum. And a third wave came, had more momentum. Finally got in, took a long time, was tired. My chest was, my stomach laying on the sand, just breathing. I was so glad to be back. I mean, when I touched that earth. So when I get back to Los Angeles, it's a friend of mine. She's a medium. That's what she does for a living. She's a medium. And I was telling her about my experience. And she got all like a little girl, all giddy. She said, can I look? I said, sure. She closed her eyes and she said, oh, you asked for help. I said, yeah. She said, you know, the angels can't help you unless you ask for help. They can't intervene in your life until you ask for help. She said, you asked for help. She said, an archangel gave you 3 waves. And that's how you got in. So help, hello, eternal loving presence is a part of my practice. You know, I wake up in gratitude. I'll surrender to God. I'll ask for the energy to handle my assignments for the day. And I said, I need a little help. I need a little help here, like that.
Oh, that's beautiful. And for our brothers and sisters in recovery, the most important thing is to learn how to ask for help and say, I don't know. Oh, that's powerful. Okay, there's so many great stories. You're in Senegal. You're seeing Senegal, and you're seeing these women in these bright outfits.
Yeah.
You pay them a compliment, and what does their respond, Michael? Huh?
It's true, thank you.
What did they say?
It's true, thank you.
It's true, thank you.
Yeah, there was none of that shy. No, this is not my. This is just an old something I just threw on today. But yours looks good, you know.
Right.
And the women, like the bright clothes, that's a beautiful dress. It's true, thank you.
It's true, thank you. That's powerful.
I
like
took that on.
Yeah, you took it on.
I took it on, and somebody pays you a compliment, receive it.
Right on, you receive it.
Somebody says you helped change their life, thank you very much.
That's right.
God bless you. Don't say, well, you know, it's nothing. You know, it was God, it wasn't me. Yeah, it was God as me.
That's
you know?
right. That's right. I talk about, and forgive me if I'm pronouncing his name wrong, Malidoma.
Oh, Malidoma Some.
Powerful story.
Malidoma Some, very powerful shaman, mystic out of West Africa. And he was a good friend of mine. He just passed a couple of years ago. And I remember one time we were doing a conference about to put on a conference in Palm Springs. We wanted him to be a speaker. I hadn't heard from him in a while. And I said, okay, by the time I get to my office, I'm gonna drive from Palm Springs to my office in Santa Monica, I'll hear from him. So I'm pulling into the driveway and the receptionist comes out, Maladoma's on the phone for you. And so I get to the phone. I said, Maladoma. He says, yes, you want to speak to me? Like that. I said, yes. He says, I'm in LA, you know. So he said, I'm staying at such and such a hotel. Come visit me. So I go stay, and we talk till 5 o'clock in the morning. And one of the things he shares with me is his adult initiation. Now, he'd had initiation when he was a teenager. If people don't know the story of Malidoma Some, his book is called Of Water and the Spirit.
Powerful book.
Very powerful. He was kidnapped as a young kid. Mm-hmm. And that oftentimes the Catholics would kidnap the young boys from Africa and indoctrinate them into this Western understanding of Christianity. And he escaped when he was a teenager, got back to his village, and there was something missing in the communication. He still knew his language perfectly, but there was a gap. He didn't understand what the gap was. And so they told him, you'd missed your initiation. Generally, the boys are initiated around 12 years old. He's now a teenager. And he said, I want the initiation. They say it's very dangerous because you've been in the Western world and the way they see the world is different. They see everything as solid. This is real. This is reality. Where in our tradition, everything's waves of energy. And, you know, this is not really real. It's not forever. So you can get really hurt because you haven't, but if you want to go through it, but you might not survive.
Wow.
So he went through it. Now, in this particular village, this is important to the story. When a mother is 7 months pregnant, she brings herself to the center of the village, and the resident shaman, healer, whatever you want to call him, channels the baby, goes into a trance, and the baby, the soul that's growing in the lady's stomach, speaks and says his or her name and why they are taking a human incarnation. So Malidoma goes through all these parts of initiation, very dangerous for him. He ends up back in his mother's stomach and he says his name. I am Malidoma Some. I am the bridger of two worlds. It was his destiny to be kidnapped, to learn the ways of the Western world, to come back, to be initiated so he could take the teachings into the Western world. Subsequently, he got his BA. He got a couple of masters. He got his PhD, and he taught in the universities, and then he taught people through workshops, but he was able to understand how Western people think because he had been kidnapped, but he also had the indigenous culture all in him. So when he did the adult initiation, he had to put the mud on his body. This is what he told me that night. He had to put mud on his body from his village. He couldn't bathe for about 30 days. That the mud's baking. He said after a period of time, he could hear the earth speak to him.
Oof.
Oh, she spoke. She's mother, Gaia. And she told him that the earth had gone through another cycle. She had gone through another cycle of consciousness. Her vibration was very high, and she was waiting for humanity to catch up. And that we were going through a period in which the old would be dying and the new would be being born, but it's going to be volatile, it's going to be nasty, it's going to be violent, it's going to be polarization. But for people who are able to keep their vibration high, they'll pass through this period with relative ease, whereas those that get into loggerheads of hate and being right and ego, it's going to be a difficult time, you know. And it appears as though that's what we're going through now.
Right. Oh, that's so powerful. Thank you for telling that story. Like, how do you, I mean, I've listened to you and you rise above all that stuff.
Yeah.
You say things like difficult times, difficult things. You don't identify with it.
Right.
Can you talk to our listeners how you learned that skill and why that's so important?
What's happening is I'm in a zone of what I call the real world, not the world of appearances. This is the world of appearances. It is a simulation of separation where people actually have a belief that they're separated from God. They're separated from their higher self, and they create a world out of that. Because the world is the condensation of beliefs, opinions, points of view, perceptions, positionalities that, creates a world. Two people can be standing in the same spot on the planet, but be in two different worlds just based on their worldview. So I'm actually in tune with the possibility for humanity. So even though I'm not blind to this stuff happening on the planet, I'm not blind to the hate, the bigotry, the anti-Semitism, the Islamophobia, all this, the greed, the stealing. I'm not blind to any of that, However, it is my job to actually bring the good news, to actually bring the frequency of the Most High to the planet. I can't do that if I get caught up in the undertow.
Right.
I know it's there. I see
Right.
it. I experience it sometimes. You know what I mean? But the presence of God is more real than all of that, you see. So it's part of my job to wake people up to that. Sometimes I can see like a thought form jump into a person, and they actually believe they're thinking those thoughts. They're not. The thought form is just taking them over. They've watched the news once too many times, and they actually believe that, and they get it. It gets all in them. They're not even aware that they're under a hypnotic spell of self-loathing. They're not good enough. Whatever it is, it's a hypnotic spell. I am here to help wake people up from the hypnotic spell, for them to fall deeply in love with the God presence within them. And let the God times roll. Yeah. But it's real to me. It's not like a lecture. You know what I mean?
Oh, you live it.
It's just like, this
You
is
live
real.
it. You live it. Talk to me about this. The stages of spiritual growth.
That began a number of years ago when I was teaching at the university, and a woman asked a question. She said, in the book, there's a book called The Science of Mind, Science of Mind and Spirit by Ernest Holmes. She was referring to this book. And, he knew Bill W. They wrote together. Different things.
That's right. Wow, nice reference. Thank you.
And she said, listen, the book, there seems to be a contradiction. One part of the book, it talks about name it and claim it. If you can conceive it, you can have it. You can have it all. The other parts of the book talks about deep surrender. Surrender your life to the present. I can't mesh those two together. So I started walking up to the blackboard, and I said, no, this isn't a contradiction. These are stages. And I went up to the blackboard, and I said, the first stage is the stage of a victim. We actually think our destiny is determined by external circumstance. Whatever happened to you when you were born, whatever going on in the society, how you were imprinted, what somebody said about you, you're a victim. Guess what happened to me? And I'll never be able to make it because of all of these things, all the mistakes I've made, all the things that were done to me. I'll never be able to make it. That's a victim consciousness. Something is happening to us. I said, the next stage is something happening by us. And now we learn that there are spiritual laws in the universe. And as you begin to practice these laws, your life can change. That's stage 2. That's the stage of the manifester. You re-enchant your imagination. You begin to change what comes out of your mouth. You change your conversation, change the kind of people you hang around. You begin to manifest a different world. And that's a good world, but it's not finished. The next stage is through us, where the Spirit of God, Spirit of love, the Spirit of intelligence is operating through us. So of our own self, we can do nothing. There's something coming through us now, you see? And so because of the work we did as a manifester, we now have a fundamental belief that there is a law in the universe. Things don't just happen. They happen just according to our thoughts, our beliefs, our opinions, our points of view, our emotional content. We outpicture all of that stuff into the world. And then the next stage is it operates as us. That the lines of separation dissolve, and we realize, oh my God, I'm it. My life is the life of love, intelligence, and beauty. There can be no other life. So each stage you have to give up something. To go from stage 1, the victim, to learning how to manifest, you have to give up blame and shame. You have to give it up. You can't blame anybody anymore. You can't even blame yourself.
Done.
You have to make amends. You have to forgive.
Right.
Every path has forgiveness in it. So in stage 2, you're learning how to manifest. But now what happens is little by little by little, you're giving up control. You can't control anything. You think you can. But eventually there's an order we all depend on. We didn't create the order, but we can surrender to it. And then our life is ordered. Your steps are ordered by the Lord. Your steps are ordered by the law of life if you surrender to it. So that's stage 3. You've given up control. Now, you don't just wake up one day and just say, I'm going to give up control. It's work. You have to,
work.
you know.
Every day, persistence.
Every day. Until you realize, oh, you're giving up more. The ego is less and less in control, and your soul is more and more in control. And then it operates as you. When you look at the life of the great master teacher, you look at the life of Jesus as an example. He says, one, it's not me. It's the presence of God within me. Stage 3. Stage 4, when you see me, you see he who sent me. I and God are one. You see the dance between these two stages. Buddha said the same thing in his own way. So there's a dance there. So we learn the dance of, it's not me, it's presence. Oh, I feel so at one with the presence. It's not me. And then when you need to go back to stage 2, you use your imagination properly, you use your speech properly, you visualize properly, you see. So those are the 3 stages, and it came into being, and it became a central part of my teaching years ago. And now it's one of those things that's pretty much in the culture. I see young kids coming on the website saying things like, "Oh, there's these 4 stages of spiritual growth and development. Here are these 4 domains."
Yeah. That's beautiful.
It makes me feel good.
I hope so.
Yeah. I laugh. I say, "That's beautiful."
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Why is forgiveness so important, Michael?
I call unforgiveness one of the highest levels of self-abuse. Because you are keeping the toxicity, the toxic chemicals, the resentment, the animosity, the blame that you're trying to project onto somebody else. Maybe they did something wrong. Maybe they did. Maybe they stole from me. They lied about you. But if you don't forgive, all that's in you. So I teach that all forgiveness is self-forgiveness. Even if you're forgiving another for what they did or didn't do, you're still releasing from yourself the toxicity. And if you made a mistake, you did something you weren't supposed to do, you hurt somebody, you harmed somebody, you have to forgive yourself. So you're not carrying that shame and blame as a cadaver on your back the rest of your life. So every path with heart has forgiveness in it. Yeah, and that sets you free. You become free. Without that, you're abusing yourself over and over again.
Over the years, somebody struggling in a bad relationship, struggling in a bad business relationship, and their frequency isn't so fine-tuned.
Yeah.
What's your counsel to them to help them wake up and move on?
Well, you begin, the first one right there is forgiveness. It has to be a part of persistence. You go to bed at night, you scan your day, you see where somebody annoyed you, you see where you annoyed somebody, and you forgiveness, so you get clean. And then what you do is, a good practice is when you're going to sleep, when you're waking up, you're laying in bed, you scan your body, you relax the body temple. And with the awareness that we live in a field of not only infinite potential, but we live in a field of infinite possibilities, you actually go in and you choose a possibility for your life. You choose it. You make a choice, but not from worry, not from fear, but you actually relax and you choose it. Go to sleep. You wake up. Before you totally wake up, you choose it again, but you feel that it's already happening. And then again, your nervous system starts to recalibrate itself around that thought and around that feeling. So now your body becomes an ally. So what happens is the nervous system has been so coded and calibrated with worry, doubt, fear, hate, all kinds of stuff, that even if you pray, Your body's saying, no, you ain't going nowhere, man.
Right.
I'm coded with anxiety. I'm addicted to fear. I got to get my daily dose.
Right.
So when you start to recalibrate the nervous system through basic spiritual practices, now your body starts to come into alignment with your thought. Now your body and your mind is coming in alignment with your soul faculty. This isn't magic.
Right.
This is practice.
Practice.
Yeah.
Practice. Michael, why is community and service so important?
You have mentioned two strong modalities. Service, there's something called karma yoga. Like when you are in an act of service, whether it's volunteering, assisting somebody in any way, what happens is you're coming out of yourself, your little self, and you're serving. And when the moment you begin to serve, again, your whole biology changes on the inside, but the barrier between you and who you're serving breaks down, and you actually see you're serving yourself. You're actually serving to grow into an expanded vision of yourself. So service is a quick pathway to spiritual awakening. If people want to come out of depression, go serve somebody. The energy will change. People want to come out of grieving, I tell them there's a tradition in the Islamic faith that you grieve for 40 days. 41st day, you do a project in that person's name. Doesn't have to be big.
Right.
It could be cleaning up litter, whatever. But you do it in their honor so that the energy changes from grief to you actually, because energy is never created or destroyed, it just transmutes itself. So when you go into an act of service, you're taking that anxiety or worry or grieving and it's being converted into a higher frequency. Service is powerful.
Right, powerful.
And then community is really powerful. I have said over the years that true spiritual community grants you immunity from the lower frequencies of life. So when you come in and you're with open-hearted, open-minded people that doesn't matter their political affiliation, doesn't matter the color of their skin, where they were born, nationality, but if they're all having an intention to really become the next great vision and version of themselves, that creates a field. It's a living field that can be measured. When you come into a community with that kind of field, it helps you when you're down. It helps you go further when you're soaring in flow. So community is extremely important, which is why I was cajoled into starting a spiritual community.
Listen, you've been doing this for so long. I know you've counseled so many addicts.
I have.
Right? Tell me about your experience with that and what you've noticed, what works, what doesn't. What do you...
Basically, what we eventually get to is that they are addicted to that moment of flow, that moment of connection that they attributed to sex or they attributed to heroin or cocaine or alcohol or whatever it is, and they're trying to get back to that state. So I seek to help them to get to the state without the external stuff that they're attributing to their high. So it has to go in mentally first, and then through some of the exercises we've talked about, they begin to see. It depends on what they're addicted to and how they're viewing themselves. You have to go through self-love and appreciation exercises, but eventually there's a moment where they attain the state without the drug.
Right. Let's talk about gratitude and let's talk about graciousness to receive it.
Yeah. That God is not on and off, start and stop, having a good day one day, bad day the next day. God is the same yesterday, today, and forever. So our graciousness and our gratitude is basically becoming receptive to what's already happening. We're plugging in. So we have this light here. This light bulb is creating luminosity from electricity because it's plugged in. You unplug it, there's no luminosity. You can have the perfect light bulb. You can have all the stuff. You can have a perfect body temple. But if you're not plugged in through gratitude, self-love and appreciation, service, that's how you plug in. Then all all of that electricity can flow, and then all of this presence can start to flow through you. I call it glowing for God. You start to glow.
You're bright, brother. You're bright. You're glowing. You're glowing.
But it's not just this.
Yeah.
It's actually the invisible presence
Amen.
that I'm trying to give visibility to.
I know you are.
You know,
I know you are.
as you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, brother. I
Yeah,
appreciate
you're so enthused all the time. Every time I've seen you, anyway, you're like on fire.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Michael. That's quite a compliment for me. Talk about your show, Take Back Your Mind, the podcast. It's powerful stuff.
Yeah, to take back your mind, I'm trying to interview people and have conversations around how people basically take back their mind. What's their backstory? How do they come out of the hypnotic spell of the media and the fear and the contagion of worry and fear that sweeps the nation and sweeps the world? How do we come back to ourselves? And everyone is different. Everyone has a way of languaging that. You came on, you kicked Cosmic Keister with your story, you know, how people just come back. And I always teach that we are not special people. We've just learned to specialize in something.
Oh, God, I love that.
You know, it's
Right.
like when you hear a great pianist, he specialized for years learning the scales, practicing, and now he can do music. He's not special, but he's specialized.
Beautiful.
So I try to bring people on that are specialized in some area of their life, and we look at them, we love them, we applaud them, we celebrate them, but then they give us their hacks. They give us their how do you specialize? Yeah, so that's what the whole thing is about, taking back our mind, opening up our heart.
So in our closing minutes, final thoughts, whatever, and then I would, if you're open to, lead us in prayer, because I love okay?
Absolutely.
Final thoughts and
Any
lead us in
final
prayer.
thoughts is that sometimes people suffer from two things: an attention deficit disorder. You know, we know about attention deficit disorder, ADD, ADHD, all that. But many people don't establish any intention for their life. You know, so intention is a rudder. Wake up. You don't have to know how to do everything, but establish an intention to be in joy, an intention to be prosperous, an intention to be healthy. Just establish the intention, and then the rest will begin to follow you. And then the other thing is people also suffer from this, and you know about this, that they're not worthy. They're not worthy of the good life. They're not worthy to be happy. They're not worthy to be safe. You know, and I want people to know that the Spirit of the living God has never made a mistake.
Oof.
The Spirit of the living God has never repeated itself, and it got us right the first time.
Boom.
That who we are in the eyes of God, God's eyes are too pure to behold iniquity. Who we are in the eyes of God, the teacher said, who by taking thought can add 1 cubit to their stature? You can't improve upon what God has done, but you are worthy. You're developing a worthiness to absolutely let go of the debris and let your light so shine to the best of your ability that when they see you, they see the presence. But everyone has worth.
Yeah, amen.
And no one has more worth than anyone else. Doesn't matter how much money someone has or how fast they ran in the Olympics or whatever. Everyone has the same value. Years ago, I used to do this one thing. I used to take, and it's old now, but back in the day, it was new. I would take a $100 bill, just ball it up, and throw it out in the audience, whoever caught it. And I would say, is that $100 bill still worth $100? They say, yeah. I said, you can have it. I said, you may have been kicked, scrumpled up. You may have made all the mistakes in your life. You may be as crumpled as that $100 bill, but you have the same value to God.
Ooh.
You know, the same value. So self-love and appreciation is extremely important on our journey to grow into that.
Well, that's beautiful. I'm very grateful you took the time out of your busy schedule to come down here and drop such truth for everybody.
It's my joy, man.
Okay. You want to take us out in something?
Let's enter into a prayer zone.
Yeah.
So I invite everybody that's watching or listening to take your attention away from the world for a moment. The world of effects, the world of circumstances and situations and conditions, opinions, points of view. Come within. Feel your body breathing. Your body's breathing in the present. That inhalation and that exhalation is not in the future. And it's not in the past. It's right presently happening. So we come right here and right now, and I invite you to step with me into the feeling tone of gratitude and thanksgiving for anything at all. Be absolutely grateful, thankful for your existence, for your life. Be thankful for life itself. As I move into this prayer, I'm so grateful and thankful for my life that I can recognize, I can recognize the presence that is everywhere. I know the presence of God anew now, right now. And I feel so at one with this presence that I can say, I am what thou art, and thou art what I am. And there's no distance between me and the power and the presence and the love of God, because the presence of God is omnipresent. It is everywhere, means that it must be where we are right now. And because of this absolute truth, I have the privilege and the honor to speak the word for each and every one of us, that whenever anyone hears this word, I can say unequivocally that right where they are right now, God is. And that this divine presence is coursing through their spiritual veins in such a way that one, every organ, action, function of their body temple is made every whit whole. There is a blessing upon the body temple that's allowing divine wholeness and wellness and well-being to reign supreme. There's a mental body now being cleared. Our mental bodies are becoming clear. The word is spoken. Our emotional body is becoming pure. The body of our affairs are reflecting and revealing the order of the universe. All of our needs are met. This is the word that is being spoken right now. And anything whatsoever that would hinder, delay, obstruct, or deny this, it has no power here, because there is only one power, and that's God. God is infinite, and there is nothing that truly exists outside of the infinite. So it is in this consciousness of thanksgiving, of knowing that that word that has been spoken is already done in the mind of God, and yet it is unfolding, it is manifesting. I say thank you. I give thanks, and I allow it to be so. And so it is, now and forever. Amen. And so we say to ourselves, now so be it. Be it, be it, be it. Amen.
Amen is right. Thank you, brother. The Seano Show is a production of iHeart Podcasts, hosted by me, Seano McFarland, produced by Pod People and 28th Ave. Our lead producer is Keith Cornelek. Our executive producer is Lindsay Hoffman. Marketing lead is Ashley Weaver. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.